Namaskara, Mangaluru. We are audible? Okay. Good morning to everyone. It's an usual practice. Generally, a session on narratives has always been the first one, and we have the privilege of being here. Thanks to the organizers for having us here this morning. I have two legends, luminaries of India's strategic thinking as well as foreign policy. On to my left, I have Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare, Principal Advisor to the Ministry of Defense, who has done exemplary work and continues to serve the nation in different capacities. More than anything else, he's been someone who has always been available to people. Even yesterday, he had been to Manipal and he interacted with students and everyone. On the right side, I have our Ambassador Sajjanhar. He has also been a person whom we looked up to, someone who is an expert on Central Asia, not just Central Asia, on India's foreign policy itself, who is associated with IDSA to all different institutions. They have been an inspiration. It's indeed a privilege to chair a session where both of them are here. Now, without wasting much time, I'll directly plunge into the very topic that's been given to us. Often we hear this one that at least in the last let's say 4 to 6 years, that India has arrived at a particular position where India's voices are heard. And India is not trying to copy the West. India is not trying to hold on to something that has already been given, tested, or something that has been driven. But rather, India is trying to carve its own space. And at the same time, it is also trying to be that sort of a power where I've always said that the 3 C's are exemplarily important for India, which is I say that India is a confident one, a cautious one, but the third that is much more important, which is courteous one. So we have a confident India that is trying to do something that is different from others, but at the same time, the idea of dharma that is driving India's strategic thought to foreign policy. Now, every country will have its national interest, which is primordial, which is aspirational, operational, and then there is a polemic. I think what we are dealing with is the polemic of the aspiration as well as the operational part. Because every country wants to be a great power or a superpower or a major power, but when it comes to the operational part, they stumble. They would not be having that sort of a human resource. They would not have capabilities. They would not have resources to many other things. Whereas India has been able to manage both of these, and then now it is setting a narrative. So my question starts off at the very early stage. Has India been able to be part of the agenda setting in the international system? So I'll start off with Ambassador Sajjanhar, and then I'll move into Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Nanda Kishor, for, first of all, for the invitation here, and thank you to Bharth Foundation, thank you to Nitya, thank you to the Mythic Society, and delighted with the arrangements here, excellent arrangements. And also, thank you for the invitation to participate in this first, so to say, takeoff session as far as the position of India in global affairs and the role it has played and the possibilities, the potential that it has. I would say, in a manner of speaking, that it is a work in progress, that we have arrived, of course, over the last, you mentioned 4 or 5 years. I will take it even slightly before that, about 8, 10 years, because I think that is when India, you would recall, when the Prime Minister was addressing the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort, right at the beginning, 2015 or 16, what he said is we need a change in our mindset. We need to ensure we are not defensive or apologetic about what we are. We need to be confident, one of the words that you used. And I would say that over the last 10 years, there have been very many things that have happened in the world. One of the most important issues as far as India is concerned is, economically we have grown. We have become much stronger. So India's voice is heard with much greater respect. For instance, if I were just to give you a little bit of statistics, in 2014, if India was the 10th largest economy in the world, today we are the 5th largest economy in the world. and we are close to about $4 trillion and going on to 5 and then very quickly on to $10 trillion. We are likely to become the third largest economy before the end of this decade. And of course, there are international agencies like the International Monetary Fund, like the World Bank, which say that India is the star performer. And this particularly when there are so many global challenges, you know, whether it started with the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, at the beginning of 2020, and that led to so much of you know, supply chain disruptions. Then we had the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, notwithstanding all these, India has been able to grow. India has been able to introduce so many reforms. And you know, we could go through it, whether it is the GST or the bankruptcy insolvency code. So the first point I would like to make is that India's capacity has grown over these many years. And in that context, I think India's voice is heard with greater respect. The second point I would like to make is that India's leadership has been both, as you said, courteous and cautious. I would say it has been firm. We know our own mind, but as is the term that is used, that we want to be friendly to everyone. The role of a Vishwamitra, you know, be friendly with everyone. And that is why you would see the manifestation of that possibly in the success of the G20. Because all the leaders who came here, I think the world at large was thinking India will not be able to come up with a consensus document. India came up with a consensus document, not at the end of the conference, but on the first day itself. And that is because the world did not want India to fail. The last point that I'll make here is that India has become the partner of choice as far as the world is concerned. I think the world realizes that all the challenges that are being faced, whether it is climate change, whether it is poverty, whether it is sustainable development goals or terrorism, none of education, health, none of these challenges can be effectively dealt with unless India is on board. And in that context, I think it is different countries want to associate with India. And you can have a look at, you know, the world leaders who are visiting India, who have visited India recently, the fact that when we got in touch with President Macron to come as the chief guest at our Republic Day, within 2 days, you know, we got a positive affirmative response from there. So the world wishes to associate with India because they find that the position that India is advancing of you know, what we put in the G20 motto, one earth, one family, one future, coming together of everyone. We are talking about cooperation. We are not talking about further polarizing the global affairs. So I think India's role has definitely increased, but we have some way to go.
Absolutely, sir. I think that's a brilliant answer, sir, because India is looking for cooperation rather than confrontation. That's the take home from your components. That's slightly because he has spoken on that part of the agenda setting. I'm just trying to bring the other side, because you being a strategic thinker, the way India handled the Ukraine crisis, or the way India has been still responding to the Palestine and the Gaza crisis with regard to Israel. And India is also trying to tell people that essentially you need not take sides. You need not take that moral pedestal where invariably you are biased. So how is India able to manage this particular crisis, apart from what we have been able to do with Pakistan since 2016 to the neighborhood itself? Perhaps your thoughts on that, sir, in terms of the agenda setting component.
Thank you, Professor Nanda Kishor, and a very big thank you to the organizers as well as the kind audience who are present here, possibly online also. As far as the world order is concerned, the kind of crisis that keeps coming very often, Currently, you look at what is happening in the world. You have the Russia-Ukraine thing happening, and it's continuing. Obviously, that is the pushback which Russia wanted against NATO uh, on its periphery. Then you have this present crisis of Hamas-Israel. And how did India fare into these? See, India traditionally, the diplomatic thought process has always been that we don't want to toe anybody's line. We have an oriental wisdom, we have our strength, and even at that stage when we went in for non-alignment. So is it that that is what we are following today? No. I think we are doing multilateral alliance, multilateral engagement. We are doing minilateral engagements. We are building the confidence of the global south. I think India really performed well by organizing the SCO summit and thereafter the G20 summit, and you had a lot of skepticism at a stage that what would be the acceptance of the people around the world. I think both these instances have proven that India has been quite good at taking a stance which is national interest driven, not from pressure politics. Leveraging by the superpowers, India has been quite good at ensuring that not only did it hold its own, it also took the global south together. And that is the way forward that we have been showing. What is it that India did? Okay, India is not favoring the killing of innocents, but India is very clear about one part, that terrorism is not acceptable at all. We have been victims of terrorism all through, and even now we face that threat today. So while we are very clear that terrorism is not acceptable, but killing of innocents is also not acceptable. And as regards Russia, Ukraine is concerned, okay, we don't support any violence, but we are very clear that this kind of push from the West is unwarranted. And when people started preaching to us that, you know, we are financing Russia for the war, we said no, it's our national interest where we want to have energy security. And for energy security, we did what was right. China did what it was in its interest. The Europeans also did it. So I don't think somebody can be preaching to us what is right or what is wrong. And I think in a way, even if we say that we've not really arrived there, this is not a binary situation. It's not black and white. There are shades of gray, and I think Oriental wisdom teaches us to live our entire life through shades of gray. So while you keep evolving, you keep taking a position, changing your position, taking the world along with you, and that is a civilizational connect and civilizational richness which teaches us how to shape our foreign policy, national policy. You may not be dictated always by a document, but by the concepts, the thought process, and the evolution of how to do good for the country and how to do good for the world.
Thank you, sir. I think the concept that you brought in terms of saying that we have our own wisdom on which we tend to do that one, I think we have also arrived at a place to tell that Europe's problem is not everyone's problem. And then where we were able to tell that whatever we are buying in a whole of month, you buy in an afternoon. I think even to tell that one, I think there's an amount of confidence that has come in because one needs to differentiate between confidence and arrogance. I think India has always been extremely cautious to be that confident one. Now, having said this, at the same time, I'm also trying to look at what type of leadership on three fronts. One is the global south that we are talking about. What exactly is the global south, that leadership that India is trying to look at? Second is that what type of role that India is anticipating in the Indo-Pacific? Is there some sort of a saturation, or India is able to drive something more than that one, whether it is Quad or AUKUS or any of these things? And third, India is somewhere being asked in many places, including that of the conflict zones, to be a negotiator. Whether it is Macron, whether it is Zelensky, we see so many other people, in fact, asking India to be that sort of a negotiator. Now, what is exactly India's strategy in terms of dealing with these three components that I spoke about? One is the global south, the Indo-Pacific, and then trying to be a negotiator. Is India prepared, and is India having a sort of plan to go ahead with?
I think, there is so much of uncertainty, Professor Nanda Kishor, as far as global affairs are concerned, because, it's not a straight line. Because if it was a straight line, then you could say, okay, I'm here today, and I can extrapolate my position maybe after a few years. But that's not what is happening. We have seen so many black swan events taking place. The manner in which COVID-19 came, and we thought this is coming after 100 years of the Spanish flu. So this is one black swan event, and we are done with black swan events for some time. Within 2 years, less than 2 years, we had the Russia-Ukraine conflict. No one expected it. And even if people expected it, they said, okay, it's going to be in a very limited part of Europe. The impact of it is going to be very, very regional, very, very local. But you see, in terms of the shortages and the price increase of energy, of food, of fertilizers, in terms of the increase of debt that took place as far as particularly developing countries are concerned. So the impact has been huge, and after that we have this Israel-Hamas conflict. You see what is happening. Iran is pounding Pakistan and Syria and Iraq. North Korea is shooting off missiles and sending. So the point I'm making is it's a very uncertain world. It's a very unpredictable world. So we have to deal with that. We have to be very nimble-footed. And that is what we have been, so far. And I think the leadership tries to think 2 steps, 4 steps ahead and look at all the possibilities that can appear and then try to react to that. Now, India was the first one which brought this whole concept of the global south into the normal parlance. And just imagine, we took over the presidency of G20 on the 1st of December 2022. And in January, we had organized the first Voice of the Global South Summit, in which more than 125 countries participated. I think India is not only doing the talking, India is also walking the talk. Because whatever we got from the developing countries, we were able to include it and put it, impregnate it into the final declaration as far as G20 is concerned. I think if you look even as far as our own policies are concerned, you look at the Vaccine Maitri initiative. You have India starts its own vaccination on the 16th of December 2021. Sorry. And we start sending millions of vaccine doses on the 20th of January, within 4 days. So India is sending out, reaching out to the developing world. You spoke about the global south. So definitely, there is that level of confidence as far as the global south is concerned, that when India grows not only for its own people, but India grows for the benefit of the world. And that is why there is that confidence. The second part you said about the Indo-Pacific. Now, Indo-Pacific is definitely has emerged as an area of contestation because of basically China's assertiveness, China's aggressiveness in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea. But the manner in which we have taken it up is, to bring in position, a reincarnation of the Quad which existed in 2007, but which was really put on the back burner, it was revived in 2017. And what the Prime Minister has mentioned, that it is a force for global good. So we are not using Quad, or we are not using our discussions on the Indo-Pacific in terms of confrontation, in terms of contestation. But basically getting countries together, not only the 4 countries, India, Japan, Australia, and US, but other countries, so that we share the vaccines with them. We collaborate on the, ICT, the critical and emerging technologies, yes, with them, on the humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, marine domain awareness. So all these issues we are focusing on, and we are getting much more cooperation and collaboration from the regional countries. So I think Indo-Pacific is definitely, again, so that there is greater cooperation that we can bring about. And the last question was on
negotiations.
Yeah, so as far as the negotiations, I think it is not only Zelensky, it is not only Macron. You would recall that even when the External Affairs Minister was in Moscow, even when he met Mr. Putin, he also said that, we would welcome any role that India can play. So I think when India is, its stature is rising, its profile is growing, its clout is increasing, I think the world is looking towards India for greater leadership, not only in economic arena, but also in political affairs and also in security, how greater peace can be brought to the world.
Thank you, sir. I think, sir, taking just cue from there with regard to, I'm pretty sure that's what exactly our audience would be throwing at you people with regard to China's aggression, India's neighborhood. They will be asking about some of these newer developments that have happened. Just taking cue from there, Kautilya in his Arthashastra says that you can never satisfy your neighbors. How much ever in the front they would be saying to you that this is wonderful, you have grown, this is wonderful that you have brought this property, anything of this, but once they go inside their house, they'll be jealous of you. Now, given that sort of a scenario that you can never satisfy, there are these flashpoints that have come in. One is China, and the other one is the recent development that we have with regard to Maldives, because when I was talking to the former vice president and also the tourism minister of Maldives, he was also trying to say that it is this early part of the leadership who are not seasoned, who are not matured. That's why they are doing this one. Perhaps they will learn something from Sri Lanka. They will also learn from other players. Now, how is India able to manage its neighborhood? That's the first part. Though I personally don't believe that there has to be a day when we will first conquer or when we achieve that sort of a parity in our neighborhood, then only we look at the global leadership or global role. Here where I'm trying to ask that how is India able to manage these type of, because what comes into the general public's mind is that if India is unable to do this in the neighborhood itself, what is it generally it's aspiring to? That brings China's aggression in the borders, and then what we call as the cartographic aggressions, and then also its presence in the Indian Ocean. So how is India able to deal with this one?
See, the power struggle or the kind of mechanism which works here, China had made it amply clear in its white papers initially that as per the timelines it wants to get to a supreme position in the region, and then thereafter looking at the global dominance. So one was very clear as to what China is planning to do. So it is quite expected that in our neighborhood the influence of China would increase, because obviously this is a very good way of keeping India engaged in its neighborhood so that you don't expand your influence in the world. But that's a very myopic way that I would say China would be wanting to do. Now, there is a mentality among the smaller nations always to take advantage of the bigger ones. So that is again naturally in their own interest. So how much can Sri Lanka get out of China? How much can they get out of India? How much can Maldives do the same thing? So that happens. But India gives a lot of space to its neighbors to decide on its internal affairs. India's assistance to the neighbors is not with conditions. We are quite altruistic about it. So if we are making some projects in our neighborhood, we don't demand a kind of a role to play, which in a way the West does, and in a way even China does. So like for example, you look at what happened in Sri Lanka. So for whatever they did, the economic assistance that they gave them, they took away Hambantota. So if this is not good enough for Maldives to understand, I think life will teach them. And that is again, when you look at Bangladesh also, similar thing. You look at Nepal, similar thing. So if China is trying to propagate its own thoughts and its own dominance, then what is the end goal? That is for each country to realize. Like at one point in time, Mao Zedong had said that Tibet is like the palm of the hand and 5 fingers sticking out, and in that name of Nepal and Bhutan was also there. But despite that, they still welcome them and take economic aid. is possibly a success of China at being able to compromise the leadership on individual behavior principles. India has not been dealing with this. In fact, if I can draw another parallel, to a large extent, when we look at defense exports not being so successful in the past, was because we did not want to deal with agents. We did not want to deal with middle parties. China has no abhorrence to this kind of an activity. So the rules or the ideals that we follow are different from what China does. So, like one of the things which you mentioned about playing the role of a negotiator. Any country which has its international reputation of its ideals of being quite selfless would be welcomed as a negotiator. And the second one, whoever has deep pockets, because ultimately that is what matters.
Exactly.
So, in our region, there will never be a situation where everything will be stable. Such games will continue to be played, and by whom? Not only by those who are in Asia, but even by the extra-regional players. So we should be quite prepared to accept that such turbulence and turmoil and uncertainty will always be there. If there are elections and elections decide the fate of a country, be quite sure that money will play a major role, the personal greed and compromises will play a major role. How much of it do you want to compromise is for you to decide. If you are able to appeal to the local population of that country, that look, in this elections you played this role, may not be very good in the long run. I am very sure the democracies have a way of voting out the people in power after some time. So I think we should continue to follow what we are doing. We look at, and that's what the Prime Minister has been saying, that good for everyone.
Absolutely.
And in this entire process, how should we be focusing on ourselves? Again, he's given that idea of Viksit Desh, Surakshit Desh. So grow, be strong, and also look for good of everyone in the region. I think that is how we will have to continue.
Absolutely, sir. I think India has to be prepared. There's no other way. Visibility also brings vulnerability, because that means once you're growing, people will naturally look up to you. People will naturally trying to point out problems with them. It can be of several reasons, including that of India's rise to many other things. Now, we have another 10 minutes with us, and I don't want to take away the chance of the audience too, because I think we have created enough components or enough things that we have spoken so that now the audience can perhaps ask. It has to be pointed, no commentaries. We would want them to be pointed questions too, and also please address to whom the question is. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Lieutenant General and Ambassador, for the very deep insights. My question to both of you, I have two questions. One is the Ambassador mentioned about the formation of Quad in neutralizing the China's influence, but in the recent time, one of the key meeting got postponed, and I don't know really how much importance is being attached to Quad by their own partners. And I just want to get throw light on that. Is really Quad is having a future in countering the China's influence, especially with keeping Indian interest in mind? And the second question is, with respect to Gaza war, India took a very clear stand against terrorism, and it took very clear stand on supporting the Israel. But in the recent weeks and months, India took something, as Lieutenant General was telling about the gray area, positioning in gray area. Will it send some kind of a wrong signal by putting two legs in two boats, balancing both Palestinian interest and as well as Israel interest in taking that kind of a grayish position, especially with respect to terrorism, where we are the biggest victims in the world? So I expect both of you to address. Thank you very much.
We'll collect a couple of more questions as well. Yeah, ma'am. And I'll also come to you. After this, please get it here.
General Khandare, my question is to you. You said India is generally altruistic in its neighborhood in helping its neighbors. So considering that all neighbors, smaller countries look at national interest, how does it place India vis-a-vis when they look at their own national interest with bigger brother China? And what if India is backstabbed, and is India prepared to deal with that? Thank you.
Here, to the front. Yes. We also want some youngsters in the back to question.
Thank you. My question is to General Sir. We recently saw Sheikh Hasina coming back to power in Bangladesh. But at the same time, we see how the Hindu population of Bangladesh is getting impacted and drastically coming down. And parallelly, the terrorism or rabid Islamic influence is increasing every other day. So how do you see, the resurgence of power of Sheikh Hasina, would it be really helpful for India and particularly the Hindus in Bangladesh? Because we saw a lot of security restrictions, the army also being called in to ensure that the election is free and fair and without any coercion of pressure or from any side.
Thank you. Here.
My question is to both of you, a very short one. Social media outrage and uproar over driving public diplomacy. Point like hashtag boycott Maldives. Is it good or bad? How do you see it?
Okay. We will take this and then subsequently we come back. Sir.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much for all those who have asked the questions, and excellent questions. So first to come to yours, you mentioned about the Quad and whether it has been successful to some extent in neutralizing the threat from China. Let me put it this way. When Quad was revived in 2017, at that time China said that this Quad is going to dissipate. It is like a bubble on the surface of the ocean. It'll just burst, it'll just go away. After 3-4 years, what is China saying? China is saying this is an Asian NATO. All countries need to be really concerned about it. And there should not be Cold War mentality when we are dealing with these countries. So China is taking the Quad much more seriously. Now, as far as the summits are concerned, let me just sort of, very quickly, and I don't want to get into details because, but it started in 2017 at the level of joint secretaries and additional secretaries, meetings between the 4 countries. The first meeting at the foreign minister level was in on the sidelines of the UNGA in September 2019. In October 2020, when COVID was raging, the first in-person meeting in Tokyo in October. After that, you have in January 2021, Mr. Biden comes. And everyone was thinking that possibly that since when Mr. Trump had come, he had done away with many of the initiatives of Barack Obama. So Biden also might do away with this major initiative. No, Biden doubled down on it. In fact, the first summit took place in March of 2021, just 2 months after Biden had come. That was a virtual summit. First virtual meeting of foreign ministers had taken place in February 2021. The first summit in person took place in Washington, D.C. in September 2021. In Tokyo 2022, the second summit took place. The third summit took place again in Hiroshima in 2023, in September. All the leaders were to get together in Sydney, in Australia, but that did not happen because Mr. Biden had to go back from Hiroshima to Washington for his debt negotiations. The fourth summit, as you mentioned, was to take place in Delhi on the margins of our Republic Day celebrations if Mr. Biden had come as the chief guest to that. He, because he's got into an election mode there so far, so he's not been able to come. But I do not have the slightest doubt that Mr. Biden will be here. All the 4 leaders are going to be here. We are having these summit meetings every year, as you can see, 2021, 2 meetings, 22, 23, and now 24. So I think the leadership has invested itself politically very intensely as far as Quad is concerned, and that is what is making countries like China very worried and very anxious about that. The second question, although I think it is, and I'll leave it to General Khandare, but let me put it this way. You mentioned about Gaza, that, first we went straight on terrorism, as the General had mentioned, and then, of course, we have modified because of the developments that took place. I think what we need to realize is that policies, and particularly foreign policy, and your strategic stance is never monochromatic. It has many shades, and it can evolve over a period of time. And that is what we have done. Meaning we have been totally consistent as far as our opposition to terrorism is concerned, since we ourselves are victims of terrorism. But then we take what are the developments. And I think the success of that policy is that you had, after we took the stand, we had the visit of the Sultan of Oman coming here to India. We had the visit of the UAE president to India, and so many others, and our own External Affairs Minister going to Iran very recently. So our relations with the West Asian countries, or the Middle East countries, have not been diluted in any sense. But I will leave it to General also to respond to this. The last question, if I may, on the social media outreach that was mentioned. I think we have to be mindful of the fact that foreign policy is no longer only the domain of the government. It has gone into, amongst people. Now, it is another thing if the government takes cognizance of what the people are saying. But, in a democracy like ours, we have, I think the government is required to take cognizance. But if you look at the pronouncements as far as our government on Maldives is concerned, we have said nothing at all. Neither on the Lakshadweep, meaning, of course, when the Prime Minister went there, he spoke about Lakshadweep, which is well within his right. But the controversy that emanated after these three ministers started talking about, the government has been quite silent as far as the public domain is concerned. We've been having our conversations, like the External Affairs Minister met the Maldivian Foreign Minister on the sidelines of the NAM summit in Kampala. So there we will continue to do that. But I don't think you can stop the social media, not in a democratic country, in China, or maybe not even in China, because there also, the social media is very, very proactive. Maybe in some of the other countries, but definitely not in India. And I think the government, in its own wisdom, will take cognizance to the extent necessary of whatever is coming out of the social media. Let me finish.
Thank you, Ambassador. So, one question from ma'am on the neighborhood part, and then in Bangladesh.
Okay, just one point before that regarding Quad, very sharp assessment I want to give. Please remember, every country which joins an alliance or a partnership looks what is best for it in it. So Quad is not a purely military alliance at all. In fact, India has been quite clear about it that there are many issues which can be derived out of Quad which are good for us. So that is our stand on that. And in any case, we should be very clear that Quad is not a life insurance policy for us. It is an engagement, and that is how I look at Quad for that matter.
Absolutely.
And the second thing about smaller nations and the apprehension that one will be stabbed in the back, very realistic, very pragmatic. But how do I look at it? When you identify the threat part, any country, whenever it is doing its preparation for security, it does a threat perception analysis. In that threat perception analysis, you have clearly identified adversaries. Say, for example, in our case, you have China and Pakistan, they are identified as your adversaries. Who are the rest? Again, a mapping out has to be done. Who will be the potential adversaries? Potential adversaries when the situation changes. If the situation gets bad for us, that is the time we will have to see who is out of these neighborhood countries, who is it who will join the identified adversaries. And we make plans for that. So there is nothing to really get alarmed about it. Diplomatically, militarily, economically, all these engagements are kept in a manner that the potential adversaries are also engaged to a level of possibly entanglement, economic entanglement, so that they cannot immediately switch over. So it's a comprehensive national security architecture which works. So that is the second part of it. As far as Israel and Hamas is concerned, it's not a flip-flop. It is, in fact, very clearly identified that we just don't agree with any terrorist initiative. And if there is a backup for that terrorism to proliferate in that area, which possibly the people in power in Gaza were the Hamas people, and whatever global aid was coming, regional aid was coming, was being utilized to support terrorism in the form of tunnels. I have myself been there. I know what are these tunnels meant for. And if Israel is taking action, so while we do not agree with the innocent civilians' losses, but we definitely agree with dismantling of the terror infrastructure. So I think there we have to be very clear in this part. The next part is about Bangladesh and the Hindus in that particular area. India respects every neighbor to take its own decisions as far as its interior affairs are concerned. Like I told you earlier, we do not want to kind of blackmail or kind of push people as others do. Our diplomacy there is different. But does that mean that we agree with what is happening? No, we don't agree. So in our foreign policy, in our negotiations, this thing may not hit the news headlines, but there is an engagement and a constant leveraging of pressure where it is said that, see, this kind of activity also falls under some kind of terrorism. So internal terrorism is also one of the factors which we do not agree with. What can we do? So there are hundreds of families which come fleeing. So we make arrangements for them. So it doesn't mean that we encouraging fleeing. So while we want them to be happy wherever they are, because nobody wants to be displaced from his ancestral home. But if things become so difficult and they come across, so that is what the government is planning to do, to work out a system whereby they can be rehabilitated, but at the same time segregate those who are troublemakers and who should not be coming here. So that is, it's not a dilemma, but it's a challenge, and that challenge is being addressed. And you would have seen the government in the last couple of years has been making legal and constitutional provisions for that. And again, that is not being pushed down the throat of everyone. There is a process of dialogue, there is a process of taking views from everyone, and if there is a protest, there is a protest. But you will finally go the way the constitution allows, that is for a parliamentary democracy. You will do that. So what is happening in the neighborhood will also impact our country. In fact, even climate change is going to impact our neighborhood so much, and there will be a demographic shift. So again, we have to be prepared for that. The issue about social media, we all are clear the power that media holds over decision making, the power that media holds over public opinion in a nation. Our neighbor, China, in that three warfare strategy, while first is legal, second is public opinion, and third is psychological warfare. So two of these are in the cognitive domain. That is the public opinion and the psychological warfare. And it's been happening for many years. While there was mainstream media which could get compromised, some of it, but social media has a fair degree of independence, and the social media activists, in fact, every individual today with a smartphone is a social media activist. So if you have a population which is very well aligned and very clear in their approach as to what is the national interest, I think a lot of this nonsense which happens on social media can also be overcome. When we talk of how does the information domain get impacted, in a democracy, information domain is the deciding factor. So if we can educate our own people, and that is where the citizens come. And you mentioned about Chanakya. Chanakya has mentioned very clearly about various issues. I want to touch only on one thing, that every citizen is like a cell in a human body. If you have a strong cell, the country is strong. If you have a cancerous cell, the country just decimates. So that is the point which we should look at. What is our ancient wisdom? how is it contemporary, how is it relevant today. If you have good cyber defense, if you have good information strength, I think nobody from outside will be able to handle it. So it's a question of not being the fastest finger at sending something fastest somewhere, but it is to be able to assess, is this a good message for the nation? As a good citizen, please send it. Is it a bad message? Please stop it. Question the person who sent it to you. And if it is something where you are confused, India is a great nation. We have strength in family values. We have that Guru Shishya Parampara, where if the student of Professor Nand Kishor feels, I don't know what is this message, he'll ask him. And Professor Nand Kishor will tell him, no, no, this is bad because the implications are this. So social media, there is strength in it and there is vulnerability in it. It is for us to choose what do we want to do. And as a nation which is on the rise, I think social media and information domain is going to be the most powerful one.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure the enlightened audience will also agree with me. For sure, the general public also, whether it is social media or any media, will work towards enlightened national interest of India, and will have, perhaps given a chance, they would engage us for another an hour or two, but we have a space where you can continue your discussions with the luminaries. We can utilize their time here. Thanks for being here and sparing your time, sir. I think we are very much within the time. And thank you, all of you, for being here and then being part of this wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
We'll
Before we wind up, I request Sriraj Gudi, sir, to honor the dignitaries on the dais. Yeah, this is Sriraj Gudi, sir, one of the trustees of Bharth Foundation, honoring Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, followed by
Thank you so much.
Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare and the moderator, Dr. Nanda Kishor. Thank you so much for the session. Thank you so much. Now it's a quiz time for the audience. During his words, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, he just recalled and quoted the words of PM, what he had told during the Independence Day. Can I have anyone answering it? Yes. So your name?
I'm Bhandarkar.
Okay. Just Mr. Bhandarkar wins a book. Sriraj sir, please. One book to Mr. Bhandarkar. Thank you so much, and you are the first winner of the day, sir. Thank you so much. All of you, please note, the very next session will be on creativity, womanhood, and uniform. And as the panelists, we have Captain Sajita Naya, Major Rama Sharma, Lieutenant Colonel Ankita Srivastava, and as a moderator, we have Dr. Harshit Joseph. Request you all to be here and to enjoy the next session. Please note, audience is requested to tweet and hashtag